The image of a spearhead flying through the air has become such a ubiquitous element of prehistoric art and illustration that we might think of it as a universal symbol of early humanity. And yet, like many symbols, it's one we should take care not to over-interpret. We tend to associate these weapons with hunting, territorial defense, and organized warfare. But archaeologists have lately shown that stone spear points could serve a variety of purposes and played a variety of roles in different societies. Sometimes they could be used for ceremonial purposes or to play games. Occasionally they were used as tools, but often we don't know how a particular object was used unless we caught people in the act. So what makes us think that any particular example was meant for hunting, fighting, or something else entirely? That question comes to mind after the publication of a paper detailing the discovery of a human skeleton found in a cave in Vietnam that was killed by a spearhead roughly 12,000 years ago. To complicate matters, the spearhead was tipped with a piece of quartz that had been carefully knapped and shaped by human hands. And that's odd because weapons from this part of the world typically use bone or stone. This case may be the first evidence of conflict between hunter-gatherers in mainland Southeast Asia. I am the host, and this is the story of a mysterious weapon of the Ice Age. In December of 2017, researchers in Vietnam unearthed a well-preserved human skeleton in a cave. They dated the skeleton to be 12,000 to 12,500 years old. Given that it dates to the end of the Pleistocene epoch, otherwise known as the Ice Age, scientists wanted to learn more about the individual. But that proved to be difficult because the skeleton had been in such a bad shape. The skull was shattered and flattened, and most of the pieces were missing. Most of the pelvis and vertebrae were fragmented as well. But the team persisted, and after nearly 2 years of patient work, they reconstructed 97% of the skeleton. Their persistence paid off. Not only was this the first reasonably complete skeleton from this time period discovered in the region, they also learned that the person had died from a severe traumatic injury. The bullet lodged in his neck and fractured a bone called the cervical rib. Normally, humans have 7 cervical vertebrae in their necks, but some people have an extra bone, a vestigial rib connected to the first or second cervical vertebra. These ribs don't always appear in human skeletons, but when they do, they usually break in predictable ways if the body is placed under enough stress. In this case, the injury was unusual because it left traces of tissue growth. That meant the man survived the initial injury for several months and possibly up to 2 years before succumbing to an infection. The researchers report in a paper published Tuesday in the journal Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Biological Sciences. Those 2 years would make this the longest known human survival after penetrating trauma anywhere in the world. To understand how he managed to live so long with such a serious injury, let's rewind the clock. Imagine a young man living in the caves of northern Vietnam. It is hard to say exactly what life was like for the people who lived here 12,000 years ago, but we do know that they hunted wild animals and gathered plants for food. Maybe our young friend is gathering berries with his family when he hears a commotion. His companions are cowering, pointing at a band of strangers approaching them. Our young protagonist reaches for his bow and arrow, but the situation quickly deteriorates beyond the range of his weapon, and before he knows it, he's surrounded, with everyone staring at each other tensely. One of the newcomers takes a step forward and hurls a spear. Its target is our protagonist, who barely manages to throw himself out of the way. The spear whistles past him, embedding itself in a tree trunk just above his head. Our hero takes off running, but he doesn't get far. Another projectile whizzes past him, then another, and another. This time he can't dodge. One of the spears finds its mark and pierces his right cervical rib. He falls to the ground, clutching his neck. Blood trickles down his chest. Despite the pain, he tries to stand. He stumbles around, bewildered, trying to figure out what's happened. He feels sick. His vision blurs, but he manages to drag himself back to the cave where he collapses and loses consciousness. When he wakes up, he feels even worse. He can't move his neck without excruciating pain. He coughs violently, struggling to breathe. For a moment, he considers chasing the perpetrators out of the cave, but decides against it. He needs help. So instead, he crawls outside and collapses at the entrance. He passes out again, and when he wakes up, he is surrounded by his friends and family. They carry him back into the cave and lay him down on the ground. They try to stop the bleeding and clear his airways. They feed him and make sure he stays warm. For weeks, they watch over him as he drifts in and out of consciousness. Eventually, he stops responding to them altogether. They wrap his body in a blanket, cover him with dirt and stones, and grieve over him. It's a tragic tale, but it's likely close to what happened in real life. Well, except for the part where he was attacked by a group of strangers. He may have been hurt during a fight with someone he knew, but the circumstances surrounding his death remain a mystery. One thing that researchers can say for sure is that the wound did not kill him right away, at least not immediately. Whatever substance it was embedded in seems to have held together even after being fractured. Moreover, the researchers found traces of healed microfractures along the edge of the hole left by the quartz projectile point, meaning the bone had been fractured before and healed. There are two possibilities to explain this. One is that the fracture occurred when the person fell, and his body protected the vital tissues in his neck by breaking the rib. That scenario makes sense given that fractures often happen when someone falls on an outstretched arm or hand. However, the researchers rejected that idea because they think the fall would have also cracked the base of the skull. Instead, they concluded that the wound must have been caused by the insertion of a sharp projectile like a spearhead or arrowhead, although they admit that it's also possible that the injury was caused by a stone tool, such as a sharp axe. What makes this case even stranger is that the researchers found a small piece of quartz near the skeleton that seemed to fit perfectly into the hole left by the projectile. This kind of quartz is usually too soft and brittle to be used as a weapon, but in this case, someone had napped the tip of a shaft or dart to give it a razor-sharp edge. The tip of the quartz was slightly concave, which suggests that it was originally attached to a wooden shaft that would have widened towards the base. The base of the quartz itself had microscopic nicks and scars left by previous napping efforts, showing that it was carefully chipped and shaped by an experienced artisan. It's impossible to say why anyone would craft such a weapon, but Reyes Sustento wonders whether it could have been used for hunting birds. As for the rest of the skeleton, the team found no evidence that the man had been wounded or injured prior to the trauma that killed him. He had suffered from malnutrition early in childhood, but he grew out of it and his bones and teeth showed no signs of illness or problems as he entered adulthood. In other words, he was generally healthy. The wound to his cervical rib would have been painful. Such an injury would put pressure on nerves connected to the lungs, heart, and upper back. And yet the man survived for a remarkable length of time. How long exactly? Well, the researchers couldn't pinpoint a precise number. All they could say was that the man survived for months. In fact, they think the infection that finally killed him may have been the result of his attempts to stanch the flow of blood after he was injured. As he frantically tried to plug the wound in his neck, he may have pushed bacteria deeper into the body, and as his condition worsened, he may have started vomiting, which would have introduced more microorganisms into his stomach. The final blow may have been when his immune system weakened and the infection spread to his bones. That grim conclusion is based on traces of bone infection that appeared after the cervical rib fracture, according to the study. Overall, the team thinks the man's injury and long survival offer a rare glimpse into the lives of people in this region during the waning days of the Pleistocene. And while the attack that injured him may have been a one-off incident, it speaks to the tension that may have existed between hunter-gatherer groups who inhabited Southeast Asia before farming arrived. And to that I ask, were there really that many people around? Yes, according to some estimates. The population of hunter-gatherers in Southeast Asia at the time was similar to today's, numbering in the millions. But keep in mind that they would have been spread out over a much larger area than they occupy today. And while they may have lived in relatively small groups of up to 50 individuals, the groups would have been widely dispersed across a vast landscape. So yes, there would have been people around, but the chances of encountering others would have been relatively low. All things considered, the discovery of a well-preserved skeleton from 12,000 years ago is extremely exciting, especially when it yields new insights into the daily lives of people who lived during the last ice age. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting the channel on a crowdfunding platform. Thank you for coming on this Journey through time with me. See you next time.